Africa is a water-scarce country. That means it's one of the 30th driest in the world. Deteriorating infrastructure coupled with aging and poor maintenance of that infrastructure has been one of government's biggest challenges when it comes to ensuring that we have uninterrupted water supply in the country. For more on the water issues affecting South Africa, we can now speak to the Benchmark Foundation's Chief Researcher, David van Wyk, as well as Vaal Water Caucus Community Representative Dlamini. My thanks to you both and welcome to News at Prime. David, if I can begin with you, we are going into a week where Rand Water has said in Gauteng there's going to be 54 hours of a water disruption, and in some cases there may not be water at all, but that's not a definite at this point, and that we should not panic. Should we panic?
Well, I think that it's time for South Africans to panic about the water situation in the country, given climate change and so on that is happening, and also the manner in which we are impacting on our river system in the country, especially the Vaal River, but also the Crocodile and the Olifants rivers are under severe stress as a result of the way in which we are managing these rivers and managing the impact of industries on these rivers. So it's very, very concerning. Yes, we should be worried at this stage.
You mentioned the impact of industry, and Tiny, you're in the Vaal, and that's one of the areas where we're seeing just how much humans and industry can do damage to something as crucial as water resources.
Well, yes. If we look at the Rand, it's a watershed, and everything that falls on the south of that watershed runs into the Vaal, and it runs through old mine dumps and mine workings. It also runs through derelict and deep towns and so on as well. Old mining towns and so on that are not being properly maintained. But also we have various industries and so on, also from which we have spills as well as sewage going into the Vaal River. But also from Mpumalanga and the coal mines in the Mpumalanga area, most of that waste also ends up in the Vaal River. And the Vaal River is our most important industrial river, but it also supports the largest population in South Africa, which is that of Gauteng.
I want to bring in Tiny now because she is a Vaal resident. The water situation there is so dire that there's in fact been a committee established to deal with that very issue. Tiny, if you can hear me now, we are talking in Johannesburg right now to people who are a bit panicked by what the week will hold with this water disruption. But for you, not having reliable water supply, clean water supply, is a very real issue.
Yeah, it is a very disturbing issue, to tell the honest fact. And I was talking to some colleagues yesterday into saying this water problem is becoming a chronic thing. It's going to take ages for us not to have water, clean water, or water at all due to climate change, due to pollution, So it's becoming a very big problem, to tell the honest fact.
Tell us more about the daily reality for people living in the Vaal and the water situation. What are the biggest struggles? Sometimes
we go for days without water. We go for days without water. You must go and collect water somewhere else. No, so it's a very big problem. Sometimes we see water tanks and stuff, So everything with water, it's a very serious problem. It's a very serious problem. And remember, one can never live without water. Water is very important. We all need water. So if we don't have water, then that becomes a very big problem. And another thing, we were not actually normal.
Well, we're losing Tiny there. Let's see if we can re-establish contact. And I'll push on with you, David, while we wait to get Tiny back on a better line. David, Tiny was telling us about how on the Vaal you can go days without water at a time. How soon could that be the situation for most of South Africa if something is not done urgently?
Well, I think that first and foremost, there's a need for maintaining existing water infrastructure. Secondly, there is a need for expanding existing water infrastructure. And thirdly, there is a need for water justice. At the moment, we have the allocation of water that's not even throughout communities and not even between groups of people in the country. So there are certain communities that have more problems with water supply than other communities. And these are usually township and rural communities that don't have access to water or consistent access to water. And that really, really is a problem. We predicted 5 years ago that South Africa would be one of the first countries that would have water refugees. At the moment, a lot of our water in the Gauteng area actually comes through the Vaal Dam and from Lesotho. And, if you have persistent drought in the Lesotho area and the Katse Dam doesn't actually fill up and is able to supply us with water, we're going to have really serious problems. And, at the moment, we really can't afford to be xenophobic about our neighbors and so on, because someday we might actually have to beg them for water to supply us with water, as we're already doing with Lesotho. The government is thinking, for example, of the Zambezi River. It's thinking of the Okavango Delta and other areas to supply water to South Africa. So we need to be fairly humble and also considerate of our neighbors, because we might actually in future require water from them.
On that point then, let me talk about the future. There have been some predictions in the last few months that South Africa is headed towards a situation where by 2030, demand will outstrip supply. Are we still on course for that? And realistically, can we build enough infrastructure capacity to make sure that we don't get there within, 9 years now?
Well, I think that the only way that we're going to be able to do that is to access the aquifers and so on that are under a city like Johannesburg, for example. But the problem is that we have polluted that aquifer with a lot of mine pollution and so on. We've got one of the biggest aquifers in Africa under the Johannesburg area. And we need to begin to look after our groundwater. We need to look after all our water sources, and we need to harvest water at every opportunity that we can get, as well as trying to build up the capacity for water infrastructure in neighboring countries, and a further integration of SADC in order to avoid that situation. And I suspect that situation is going to come long before 2030.
Tani, let me come back to you. I'm told we have you back on a better connection now. And David and I were speaking about the need to build infrastructure. As people on the Vaal, you have been promised several times over the years that something is being done to sort out the pollution issues and make sure that you do have clean drinking water. What has changed?
Nothing has changed at all. As you know very well, that Gauteng has something like 6,000 abandoned mine dams, and the greatest polluters of our rivers is those mines. So it's been years. It's been years since this has been happening, and the promises are there, but there are no implementation at all. In terms of water, seriously, we are having a very big problem. And remember, at this time and age, as these mines are busy polluting our rivers, whereby maybe we were thinking, some of us were getting we're getting river water from these rivers. It's now becoming very difficult. Even aquatic life is no more there. So now it's becoming very, very, very difficult in terms of the water. Yes.
And are the polluters, the mining companies you've referenced, are they being held accountable for the damage done to your water resources?
It's been ages since benchmark. Okay.
Tiny, you go first. David, I'll come to you next.
Okay, fine. I think it's been ages since Benchmarks has been trying to push this mandate forward. It's been ages since Benchmarks Foundation has been trying to make it a showcase that people are held accountable in terms of polluting our water. Remember, at this time and age of COVID-19, we don't have clean water. At this time and age of COVID-19, whereby this high rate of unemployment, some of us are trying to make a living by trying to do farming. But now, but with those animals, if you take your animals to the stream, they die. So water is a very big problem, and I think it's going to take some years. Another thing, what is happening now in my government, the dishing out of tenders. The dishing out of tenders is also impacting in terms of our water. You see people being dished tenders. People who do not know how to do their job. When you roam around the street, you'll come across the leaking pipe. You'll come across the leaking deck. It's a chaos in terms of the water.
David, very briefly, your take then on accountability around the pollution of water, and from the municipality side, the lack of maintenance, and as Atani was highlighting, doing the basics such as fixing leaking pipes.
Well, yes, I think that a large percentage of our water, possibly more than 50% of our water, gets wasted by the lack of infrastructure, maintenance, and so on in the country. But I also think that people have a constitutional right in this country to clean water. They have a constitutional right to a healthy and safe environment, of which water is a very important part. And I think that we have discovered at the Benchmarks Foundation that very often the best way to hold politicians as accountable is to take them to court.
David van Wyk from the Benchmarks Foundation, Dlamini from the Vaal Water Caucus. Good to speak to you both tonight. Thank you.